Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. If you like the show, remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I am doing wonderful.
Excellent. Welcome to our 2021 holiday month here on That D Plus Show.
Very cozy out here. Ooh,
There you go. Yeah,
some sweaters.
for audio viewers or audio listeners, Logan threw up a fireplace background on his Discord chat today. So he's got a little warm fireplace, little artistic kind of fireplace sitting there behind him. Today we are going to be talking all about Jingle All the Way. Our first non-sequel of this year's D Plus holiday spectacular, having done the Santa Claus 2 and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York the last couple weeks. So yeah, Jingle All the Way. Why do we pick it? Well, because it's December. This is because of the Fox acquisition. It is now available on Disney Plus, and I don't think it's on Disney Plus like year round, or at least like I remember looking at this a couple months ago and like planning for what we were gonna do, and it wasn't on there, but it did kind of get added to the holiday mix, and I was like, I think they did that last year too. So the rest of the year it might be living out there on somewhere else.
I watched it on Amazon Prime.
There you go.
Peek behind the curtain. That's where I watched it.
There you go. But yeah, it's here on Disney Plus for the holidays at least. So yeah, we're diving into some Jingle All the Way. So before we dive into the history lesson, what's your history there with Jingle All the Way, Logan?
I love Jingle All the Way. Per our 20-minute conversation before we started recording, it's a superhero movie in the 90s, basically, with a dope action figure, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. All of these were things I liked as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid in the 90s. This is my bread and butter. That's great, and it's also got Phil Hartman.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was
as well.
This is one I definitely would have watched like a ton, because I would have been 11 when this came out, so it was like right in that like wheelhouse of like preteen, middle school into high school. Like it would have been like a holiday tradition kind of thing to watch Jingle All the Way, or just watch it like 100%. A ton those first couple years. And it's probably been quite a while since I've like gone back and watched this. So yeah, when like Phil Hartman pops up, I was like, oh, that's right, Phil Hartman was in this thing. And like immediately some of those memories start flooding back and all that stuff. And it was like preparing for this, it was like, oh, it's a 90-minute movie. This is going to be a nice quick jaunt. Just like a lot of these ones kind of are. So yeah, it was a fun little trip down memory lane. And I look forward to discussing some of the ins and outs of it a little bit more. Before we hop into that, though, a little bit of the history lesson here. As I alluded to there, it originally launched November 16th, 1996. So right there for the 96 holiday season. Other releases of the time, we had D3 The Mighty Ducks that Logan and I did that D Plus show earlier this year about.
Very good.
Right, you were on that one with me, where that was just a terrible one.
It wasn't great, for sure.
Also on that same day, October 4th, That Thing You Do came out. So, 1-2 punch of films there. Swingers would come out October 18th.
We're dating it, yeah.
Twelfth Night would come out. This was the Helena Bonham Carter version. Came out October 25th. Continuing on, there were a lot of I basically pulled this because there were a lot of Shakespeare's around this time. Yeah. Romeo plus Juliet, the iconic Baz Luhrmann.
Phenomenal. It's a great movie.
Came out November 1st. The English Patient, which would go on to win Best Picture that year, came out the same day as Space Jam on November 15th.
My favorite
this weekend, basically the weekend that this movie came out.
Favorite thing about the English Patient, I've never seen the English Patient. My favorite thing about it is that there's an entire Seinfeld episode revolved around the fact that different Seinfeld characters just keep falling asleep while watching the English Patient in movie theater. And so that's pretty much all I know about the English Patient, and it's very funny for me.
There you go.
Space Jam's great.
Space Jam is fine. Star Trek First Contact came out November 22nd. On the Disney side of things, 101 Dalmatians, the live action one with Glenn Close, came out November 27th this year.
That's a good movie.
December 13th brought us the 1-2 punch of Jerry Maguire and Mars Attacks.
That's a great 1-2 punch. Holy shit.
Yeah. Beavis and Butthead Do America and Scream came out December 20th, which
that's a much dicier 1-2 punch.
Yeah. Because when I think when I think Christmas, I think Scream,
and Beavis and Butthead.
yeah, Beavis and Butthead Do America. Fair enough. And then on Christmas Day that year, we had Evita with Madonna playing the titular character, as well as the Kenneth Branagh Hamlet came out on December 25th that year. So again,
great.
It was like a flurry of like, let's do a whole bunch of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's clearly hitting the zeitgeist there.
Kenneth Branagh had made it huge, and so people were like, let's capitalize on that shit.
Yeah. And that was a star-studded Hamlet because you also had like Robin Williams in there. I think was Billy Crystal in that one? Maybe.
I know that I always forget he's in Doctor Who, and he's like a super renowned actor is in it as well. What's his name? He's the master before he makes the reveal. In Doctor Who.
Gotcha. I remember who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays, I think, Polonius
I think so.
In that one. Has a runtime here of 1 hour and 30 minutes. Nice, quick 90-minute jaunt. In the 20th Century Fox timeline of things, as I said, That Thing You Do had come out October 4th. Romeo plus Juliet had come out November 1st. The Crucible would come out after this. The Crucible with Daniel Day-Lewis and Winona Ryder came out November 27th. And Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, came out March 28th, 1997. That would be the second live-action Power Rangers movie in theaters, which is, not... I don't think it's a stretch to say that the Turbo Man TV show at the beginning of this is kind of influenced by those early Power Rangers episodes and stuff. The roll call here, the director is Brian Levant, or Levant. He had done Problem Child 2 before this, as well as the first Beethoven movie. He also did the Flintstones, the live-action Flintstones movie. And he would go on after this to do the Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, as well as shout out to our friend of the show and fellow nerd on the site, Jazz, because he would also go and do a few of the Scooby-Doo TV movies. So shout out to him. The writer here for this one is Randy Cornfield, who had done a handful of TV movies before this, and then would also go on and do he would write the film Eight-Legged Freaks, which I remember being in theaters and not wanting to go to like the big like tarantula like standees that they had for this spider horror movie. Early arachnophobia kind of kicking in or something on that. And then starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as the, very Minnesotan named Howard Langston. Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger from films like Conan the Barbarian, The Terminator, Commando, Predator, Twins, Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop, Terminator 2, Last Action Hero, True Lies, and Junior, all before this movie.
Yes.
And then he would go on to be in Batman and Robin shortly after this, which even that gets a little bit of I think a wink and a nod here in this movie. And then, obviously a ton of more Terminators. He'd go on to be a governor for a little bit.
I was going to say governor of California.
And then, and the Expendables. So, this was
probably one of the most decorated stars of that D+ show's history in terms of just like a series of classic movies. He's certainly got to be up there.
I mean, maybe like I don't think a lot of his movies are in that D+ show's wheelhouse. Really,
they're not that D+ show movies. They're not Disney+ movies, but in terms of just like classic films,
there's
a lot right there.
I mean, obviously, like he was the Arnold Schwarzenegger, like he had a whole genre to himself there in the 80s and 90s, like the him and the Sly Stallones and eventually like the Bruce Willis kind of like that 80s 90s action movie. And then he like and I know this is an element that you love, like him stepping into these more comedic roles. The fact that this came after Twins, Kindergarten Cop, and Junior, and this is like the fourth of his kind of like comedic leading man turns.
Kindergarten Cop is great, by the way. It's a great movie.
Yeah. He's still, at least I'm pretty sure it's still happening. The movie Triplets is still supposed to be coming out there sooner or later. We also have Sinbad here, kind of taking second billing as Myron Larrabee. He was obviously like a very profound, very popular stand-up comic at the time, having appeared in films like Coneheads and First Kid before this. He would also go on
First Kid, that's a great pull.
In Good Burger as well.
That's true.
And
great movie.
And if you suffer from the Mandela effect, you think he was in a movie called Shazam.
Not a real movie.
No, but shout out to him because he did do I want to say it was a College Humor sketch that year for like, I want to say it was like their like April Fool's kind of joke, where it was basically like, we found the pallets of Shazam VHS tapes, and like he kind of went in and like quote unquote shot scenes from the movie that they used as kind of like a retro throwback TV ad kind of thing, because he was all for the joke. Phil Hartman, of course, the late great Phil Hartman playing Ted Malton here. Of course, iconic from his many years on SNL, as well as the early seasons of The Simpsons, as well as News Radio.
I fell down a Phil Hartman rabbit hole after watching this, and especially considering both of our loves of the early Simpsons seasons, I loved the fact that I never probably thought about it. I never knew that the show's like producers retired all of his characters after he passed away as well, which is a super lovely touch. Yep,
Lionel Hudson and Troy McClure got retired when he passed, just like when not Tress MacNeille, the woman who played Edna Krabappel for many years, when she passed. Oh, it might have been Russ Taylor. No. I don't know. No, Russ Taylor was Nelson or Martin. But anyway, when Edna Krabappel passed, they retired her character as well. Rita Wilson playing Liz Langston, not probably known to many as Tom Hanks's wife, but she was also in Sleepless in Seattle, as well as That Thing You Do. Yeah. And then would go on after this to be in the films Now and Then and Runaway Bride and a number of others. A very young Jake Lloyd, a few years before his turn as Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Phantom Menace here as Jamie Langston. And then I originally didn't pull him into this, but because he just like keeps coming back throughout the movie, I did pull in Robert Conrad as Officer Hummel, the recurring cop that Arnold keeps messing with, and digging into his kind of IMDb. He was in a ton of like Western stuff back in the day, and in particular, he was in the TV show The Wild Wild West. As Jim West, which would go on to inspire a maybe lesser renowned Wild Wild West film with
gave us
Will
the great
Smith.
Music though.
Gave us a great theme song, yes. But yeah, he basically played Will Smith's character in the TV show, and makes a recurring appearance in this. And then we also have a handful of cameos, or like, oh, that's really cool that person was in it, that I identified. Martin Mull playing the DJ in here, of course, iconic from Clue as Colonel Mustard, and then many years on Roseanne. Jim Belushi is in here as the Mall Santa, of course, brother of John Belushi, an SNL star himself. He was also in the Mighty Ducks animated series that I did an episode of that D Plus show on earlier this year, and then of course the series According to Jim. Lorraine Newman has a little cameo as the First Lady in kind of the Turbo Man film or like TV show at the the cold open of the film. Of course, she was an original cast member of Saturday Night Live. Chris Parnell in pretty much his first thing ever.
So young.
As the toy store sales clerk. He would go on to be in SNL starting a couple years after this in 1998. And then, of course, has done significant voice work in the shows Archer and Rick and Morty. He was also in the video game Maneater. He plays kind of the VO, because the whole thing's kind of like framed as like a TLC Shark Week kind of documentary thing. He's basically the documentarian voiceover kind of guy doing his Chris Parnell voice. In a similar vein, in a much more like blink and you miss it kind of thing, but she is credited, so I pulled her in here. Mo Collins is credited as Mother on Phone. So I think basically like she just turns at one point when Arnold is calling home and ends up talking to Phil Hartman. But she would also go on to a sketch comedy career on the Mad TV side of things, also starting in 1998, and then would also be a very fun recurring character in Parks and Recreation.
Great character in Parks and Rec as well.
Paul White is in here as Huge Santa. He was at the time playing
Big Show.
He was the giant actually at the time for WCW, and then would go on to be the Big Show for many years at WWF/WWE, and now is on AEW just as Paul White. So still active and still out there wrestling these days. And then the last one I pulled in here, Curtis Armstrong playing the chain-smoking Booster, of course, iconically Booger from Revenge of the Nerds, as well as he was the vice principal or principal. He was the principal on New Girl, with the shows Zooey Deschanel did.
I have two extra ones I'll give shout-outs to as well that aren't included here.
All right, yeah.
Just because, so Jim Belushi's elf, which apparently is Tony the Elf, Danny Woodburn has a great recurrent arc as Mickey on Seinfeld, as one of Kramer's good friends.
I did see that in there when I was like pulling people into it, but since I never watched Seinfeld, I didn't know how prevalent of a character he was.
He's a really funny, especially in later seasons, great recurring character. They have some great episodes with him. And then also Vern Troyer is in this as another elf, like you blink and you miss it in the background.
That I saw that in there. I didn't think it was him because like some of the trivia basically points out that he's like the one that like Arnold punches across the wall, and I'm like, that did not look like him.
It's him.
Okay.
He's got because he had basically
he's got like a Santa beard on it or whatever, but yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But there's a better shot of him when they first walk in. You can see him in like the background where he's just kind of more still. But definitely would have been pre Austin Powers.
Just by a few years.
Especially his appearance.
Because he didn't
come into the second one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right. A little bit of additional trivia there for you. Producer Chris Columbus wanted Joe Pesci to play Myron, but he was deemed too short at 5'3" next to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is 6'2".
It's incredible that Arnold's only 6'2", by the way. I feel like he's a giant.
Yeah. This was despite the fact that Schwarzenegger had previously appeared in 2 films alongside even shorter Danny DeVito. And then similarly, in the continuing the Home Alone theme there, Daniel Stern was also briefly considered for the role of Myron, but he felt it was too similar to his most famous role as Marv Merchants in Home Alone and Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and he declined. So seems like Chris Columbus was like, hey, Home Alone worked really, really well for me,
to be fair.
in those years. Let's keep that magic going. The story is based on the 1980s shopping frenzy over the Cabbage Patch dolls. However, it ended up perfectly mimicking the Tickle Me Elmo craze of Christmas 1996.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. I remember like Tickle Me Elmo, Furbies. I think those were like the 2 like really big iconic ones I remember kind of growing up. as Arnold Schwarzenegger only signed on for the film in February, and the film was shot so quickly, only 6.5 months were available for merchandising instead of the ideal year. As such, merchandising was limited to a 13.5-inch replica $25 talking Turboman action figure and the West Coast exclusive Turboman Time Racer vehicle, while no tie-in promotions could be secured. Despite this, several critics wrote the film was only being made in order to sell the toy. Chris Columbus dismissed this notion, stating that with only roughly 200,000 Turboman toys being made, merchandising was far less than the year's other releases such as Space Jam and 101 Dalmatians. And I like ironic in just today, I in one of my my team meetings, was it today or yesterday? Might have been yesterday actually. Somebody mentioned that Jingle All the Way was like one of their favorite holiday movies to go back and rewatch. And somebody else mentioned that you can go and buy a Turboman action figure now. Like it's had like a resurgence. So yeah, you can go like buy them at Walmart. And one of my coworkers, one of my team leads was actually like, I'm like basically like immediately went to the Walmart website and bought it while we were there on the call. I was like,
hell yeah.
All right, you enjoy. And
That's
I like,
super cool.
and
Yeah.
meanwhile, I'm like chiming in with some of these like fun facts that I'd already looked up because I watched the movie a couple days ago. So yeah, it was a fun little bit there. Sinbad improvised the majority of his lines, and Arnold Schwarzenegger improvised many of his responses in the conversations with him. And finally, did you remember that there is a post-credit sequence on this film, Logan?
Sure didn't. I saw it True Factor at the end. I was like, I sure didn't watch it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I think I remember
until doing the trivia. I was like, oh crap, they did put one in. So I went back and like watched it. But yes, the extra scene after the end was written to set the stage for a possible sequel. And it's basically just Arnold and Rita Wilson like standing there in front of the tree, and like Rita Wilson's like, so you went through all this trouble for our son. What'd you get me? And he just kind of like mugs at the camera, and like camera zooms in with like just a big scared face on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sure. So yeah, the sequel that, I mean, there was a sequel. There is a sequel to Jingle All the Way, but it is not
canonical. Yeah,
it's a sequel in the way that like Home Alone 3 is a sequel to Home Alone 2. It is another Jingle All the Way story, but that one features Larry the Cable Guy.
That's true.
So, yeah. So yeah, that's what I pulled in here for the trivia. So how do you think the movie holds up there, Logan?
I think that it largely does still, right? Like I enjoyed my time with Jingle All the Way, right? Like I did know a lot of the beats still, and a lot of kind of the setups and punchlines, but I still think it's really good. I still think it's a really great, 90s comedy and also 90s like prototype superhero movie in some ways. Especially like the entire in sequence, which is like one of the most like memorable sequences from me, especially growing up. Yeah, I mean, like it's great, right? Like I think there are definitely elements that don't hold up well, as you would imagine from a 1996 Christmas themed comedy film.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed my time with it still. Like I definitely thought it was still like fun, and it's a very quick movie. It's 90 minutes long. I think it moves pretty fast. And so like I enjoyed it, right? Like Phil Hartman is Phil Hartman. He's great.
Mm-hmm.
Sinbad is an incredibly ridiculous, over the top character.
Yeah.
That like could only really work with Sinbad. And I think it mostly does work. I loved the recurrent sequence of Arnold and the cop. And it was great too because like I kept forgetting how much he's in that movie. Like I was like, oh yeah, he'll be here like 2 more times, and it's like he's in the movie like 5 different scenes. Like he's just there constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really funny. And yeah, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger is very good at comedy, right? Like I know he's obviously one of the most iconic action stars, but he's very funny, and I think in particular he's got a great sense of like timing for like jokes and like beats, and when to kind of come back at Sinbad with like a quip, like one-liner kind of thing. I loved the whole sequence, for example, of like when they're in the mall, like waiting for the balls, and like the chaos that ensues with that is a really great. Yeah, so I mean, I really enjoyed my time with Jingle All the Way. Like, I think it definitely still largely, mostly holds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I like there are movies that we sit down and watch on this sometimes, and it's like, oh, I'm getting a lot more out of this now that like I'm an adult, and like and I'm seeing these. This is not one of those movies. This is very much like this was made for kids, and like as a like family comedy kind of thing. Arnold Schwarzenegger is mugging over the top. Like you kind of you touching on like he's really good at like the comedy stuff. I feel like the things in this movie that are funny because it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger playing against type, so to speak. I like it's when he's trying to be funny, it falls really, really flat for me. But like him just being the straight man against a Sinbad or against like a Phil Hartman, like that's when his comedy works. When it's him chasing after like the ball and like doing the stuff with the kid and just like looking crazy eyed and like trying to muscle a kid, it's like, okay, yeah, that's funny because of the situation, but not as much because of it because it's Arnold in this situation. I think it's like it would be funny if it was like any larger than life kind of character. I like there was a lot of this where I was like, Arnold wasn't making me laugh from what he was doing. It was like the movie that was crafted around him was what you know like brought a chuckle to me here and there. Yeah. And I mean to the cop, I had completely forgotten about like that runner. So like he pops up at the beginning and then like he pops up like the next time I was like, oh, it's him again. And then like any time the police were coming, I was like, oh, okay, yep, that's right. He's going to be here. And then like, so by the time we get to like the bomb sequence, like then I'm starting to remember these things and being like, oh, that's right. It's going to blow up like, you know, right in his hands and stuff like that. And so yeah, there was a lot of like those kinds of elements of like the humor coming back. I had initially forgotten that like Phil Hartman was like a creepy kind of neighbor, but like as soon as he's like in that first little sequence and it's you know, like all the women in the neighborhood are like fawning over him. I was like, oh, that's right. Like he's the ladies' man around the neighborhood, but like really he's got eyes for Liz, I think is her name. And he, like him kind of like turning like the few moments in the movie where like we see the charming veneer kind of like fade, like when he burns his hand and yells at the kids or whatever, are like the fun elements that I think are extra fun because it's Phil Hartman playing it. Whereas like the rest of the time it's just like, oh, Phil Hartman, you're so wonderful and charming playing this like sleazy kind of Phil Hartman character.
I really enjoyed whenever he's got the reindeer out front, and it's like again like a reminder of like this too, where the two kids are talking, right, and like Jake Lloyd's character's like, your dad's so cool, and the other guy's just like, he didn't used to be. It wasn't until him and my mom got divorced, and it's like such a like so much information is packed into that one line. It's like, yeah, I bet he was, and then he decided to be like this ladies' man who had to try to impress everyone.
Yeah. That's like that one line is what like Phil Hartman like based the entire performance around, it seems.
Yeah.
I had forgotten just how much like this movie almost owes a writing credit to Hook, which had come out 5 years earlier or whatever, because like the whole like opening setup of the film is basically the same opening setup for Hook. It's dad who works too hard and like is like kind of sleazy work, not a good dad. He's just kind of like
your number one customer.
Exactly. You're my number one customer. You're my number one customer. And even took the note that like I just kept calling him Annie throughout the film. Annie gets his blue belt is pretty much a beat for beat moment as Jack hitting the home run at the baseball game when the dad doesn't show up and the dad's misses it. And so like the central dynamic of like father trying to make things right with his kid is just like pulled verbatim basically from Hook, but instead of Robin Williams going off on a fantastical journey to be Peter Pan, Arnold Schwarzenegger goes shopping on Christmas Eve to try and find a toy.
Hook is so good. That's a good movie.
Yeah. But yeah, there were definitely like images and scenes that like immediately flooded back to me. Like the Mall of America sequence where it is Arnold like chasing that little girl down and trying to get the ball, and the mom's all basically like beating the crap out of him. I definitely felt like I remembered there being more between Arnold and Sinbad. Like I thought I felt like as a kid I remembered that like dynamic being just much more like recurring through the movie, whereas like you have entire sequences like the Santa Con kind of like racket that Sinbad's just not around at all. Like it's just like, oh no, this is just an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that Sinbad occasionally pops up in.
I find it really interesting you say that, actually, because I watching it again, I came with the impression of like, damn, Sinbad's in this movie a lot. I actually had the opposite takeaway, where I watch it because it is just that thing of like, and maybe it's because Sinbad pops up a lot, even if he doesn't have like extended stays, right? Like he's in the movie pretty repeatedly, maybe for short periods of time, right? Like he is there at the mall sequence, and then Arnold kind of goes off on his adventure, right? And he's there at like the first mall thing, and just totally out of nowhere, just like fucks over Arnold, which is like, he's responsible for the rest of the movie's events, basically. Is Sinbad, right? And like does that, and then
that's after he just like tried to strangle a woman out in like waiting in line.
Should be made clear, yeah.
And nobody cared,
unprovoked.
And
people definitely were like, "Oh, this guy's fucking crazy."
I mean, that's like there's this whole undercurrent of the movie that is like this was at a time when like going postal was like a known thing, and so him being a mail carrier is like completely just feeding off of that like societal knowledge at the time in this weird way.
Same with like Newman on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Again, just like going, but like, so I actually thought like at some point I was like, this is like his like fourth or fifth appearance, just bumping into him at like this diner at this mall. It's like he just keeps bumping into Sinbad. Like the bomb scare sequence at the radio station is one that like, it's one of those random scenes that are just like burned into my brain, right? Of like the package slowly falling in the air and then like hitting the ground, and all to be just like ripping it open, and it's a fucking like snow globe or like
a music box,
music box, right? Yeah, and so, I mean, like, I actually came away with it being like Sinbad, and then obviously he's there at the very end, like how much Sinbad was in the movie, and like I love it too to the degree of, no one in the, like, out of the two, like, Regis and Kathy Lee announcers basically overseeing the Christmas parade, neither of them thought it was abnormal what happened during the parade. They're like, yeah, this is standard fare. Superhero just like flying on a jetpack, a guy coming in, taking a kid. Like, this is all, I mean, like, what we think.
The thing is like scripted. Like they kind of like, or at least I read it as like, they were expecting a lot of that to happen, because like they kind of like do that like chummy jokey kind of thing, and the guy when Arnold's getting like put into the costume is talking about like here's the buttons, here's where the things are and stuff. So like,
got brain activity again.
Yeah, exactly. So like there was always a plan in the parade that like that Dementor or whatever was going to come out and like mess with him, and they were going to put on a show while like doing it for this kid. But yeah, they're very like chill about like things going completely awry, and the guy chasing a kid up up a billboard, up on top of a building and stuff like that. It's like, at some point you kind of look and say, they're really off book right now.
They're really committing to the bit here.
But yeah, the fact that like, they just have complete jetpack technology for this Minnesota parade, this Twin Cities parade is just like, that's a little weird. But whatever. I mean, there was also an element like
Who are we to judge?
when we got to that parade sequence and they just have like all sorts of like licensed characters. I definitely found myself thinking like, did they actually pay to get the licenses for all of these random characters? Like Sonic's in there and Snoopy and a whole host of just, and like all throughout the movie, like
they were like, who's public domain?
Not even public domain at all. Like the kid has like X-Men posters and action figures and stuff
Captain
all
America
over.
mural
Exactly.
on his
Like
wall.
yeah, he it was very much and DC and stuff. So like they kind of were like playing just like, hey, like we're gonna throw a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it's maybe it just wasn't a like movie tie-in licensing or whatever wasn't as big a thing, so like they didn't care at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, just seeing like this whole host of characters that like if the movie was made now, you would see like a big old thing in the end credits of like special thanks to all these people who paid money to have to let us put their characters in our movie. And it's weird just seeing that juxtaposed against the very generic Turbo Man like thing and just idea. And yeah, I did love I still love the recurring bit of like nobody wants the booster toy.
Mm-hmm.
And it went so far as I had this memory that clearly it wasn't like real or whatever, but I had this memory like when Phil Hartman kind of introduces the idea that he's got a Turbo Man, for Johnny under his tree or whatever, I had the idea in my head that like Arnold Schwarzenegger definitely going to go and steal that one, and he was going to find out that it was a booster or something like that. And no, he doesn't. Like he like I was half right. He definitely goes and tries to steal it because, of course, that's what you're setting up. But like it was the real deal or whatever, and he just gets caught in the act. But yeah, I definitely had that, and so like when that didn't happen, I was like, oh, okay, it must have been like that episode of The Office where that kind of thing happens, or X, Y, and Z other like tropes of this kind of like storyline in sitcoms or something where that was the thing that happened. Like there was the toy that everybody wants, and then there's the toy that nobody wants, and that's the one that like the dad mistakenly got for his kid or whatever. But yeah.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I did love the sequence of Arnold taking the toy and the reindeer chasing him. If for nothing left than when he punts the fucking Three Wise Men's head out the window, and you just get the clip of Phil Hartman just going Balthazar, and just like it's such a like it's delivered so well and like so heartbreakingly. Yeah, it is a great like Phil Hartman can just do so much with so little. Like that is like the recurring thing throughout this film, and that was a great example of that. Even like you already mentioned, but like one of my favorite scenes was him in the house when Arnold calls in, and just like walking through the house while like talking to Arnold, and like the wife is upstairs and all this kind of stuff, and then burns his hands. Says, shut up! Yeah. Just in the back is like it's Phil Hartman's great.
Yeah, and yeah, just like that wonderful like sleaze like. From like the off exactly what this character is like trying to do and what his like motivations and goals are, but he's like so like just like lovey-dovey kind of about it or whatever. And also, like another thing in here that I just was not expecting was Arnold getting the reindeer drunk after that whole sequence.
Yeah, I forgot about that for sure.
And then he has like we see him with that picture. And then we cut back to Arnold, and Arnold, I imagine, not the most prolific actor skills. So like it was definitely that thing where they like put the saline solution or whatever in his eyes and just kind of shot him with like tears in his eyes instead of like full blown crying because, we're not gonna get that from Arnold, but going back to kind of the Arnold and Sinbad like dynamic throughout the film, I love just that like there's no rhyme or reason to why they should be meeting up as often as they are, especially because like the first time they meet up, it's like, okay, that was a coincidence and they had this interaction and they were both after this toy and neither of them got it. They both kind of like betrayed each other and backstabbed each other. But then Arnold goes like on this entire montage of like going to other stores to try and find it. and then they just completely meet up at another random like location later.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I love that like because they're like, we got to kick off like the next beat of the movie. Just a guy randomly screaming out, they got a shipment of Turbo Man at like such and such a store. That just happens to be perfectly relevant to these two guys having a conversation on the street, that they can now go off and try and like chase after that
It's
next
better
location.
than that too, because again, in one sequence that like really stood out to me, Arnold's car runs out of gas, and he then apparently pushes it from the bridge all the way to some diner in the town that is also a diner that Sinbad is just at. And, like, he's just there chilling in the diner with...
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly how it cut. It was like the car ran out of gas, and then it just showed him, like... It didn't show him get out and push it, but it showed him when they got back to the diner again, he was, like, pushing it and then, like, put it in park and walked into the diner. So the assumption I got was he just pushed that car from the bridge to there, and then walks in, and Sinbad's at the diner with him too. Now in this random spot in Minnesota. And they do that whole sequence, and then like the weird again like recurrent nature, like Sinbad is just there in the movie a lot. Like he's just like creeping in the background.
He just somehow also shows up to be the bad guy at the end.
Yeah.
And Arnold just happened to stumble into being the Turbo Man at the end.
And also Sinbad knew that they were giving away a Turbo Man at that thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everything about it.
Yeah. Just like far too many convenient plot holes that just kind of like, whatever. That's they just needed to get from like one sequence to the next sequence throughout. So, who cares? Whatever. I like there's also just the idea like when they're running to the radio station, Sinbad, who has been like just carrying his whole like mail sack the whole day. It's like, wait, are you also just not doing your job today? There's that whole element. And then he just completely abandons that and starts just like throwing parcels and letters and stuff on the ground to try and like lighten his load a little bit. It's like, well, why didn't you just leave that shit in the car then? Like it's
a rookie mistake.
What's your game plan here, Sinbad? Any other highlights or favorite like other moments that you wanted to give a nod to there?
I really like the whole final sequence. Like it's definitely probably the thing that has aged the worst in terms of graphics. But like it is super, I mean like it is rad, and like it's very clear why I loved it as a kid. Like it is just like a proto superhero movie 10-minute scene. And it's great. Like in that aspect of it's really cool, right? And like Sinbad is great as the bad guy, and Arnold gets to just be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so it's a really fun like sequence to kind of watch unfold. And then outside of that, right, like I definitely thought it lasted longer, but I always remember the Santa fight. And then like the great punchline of like Arnold grabbing a fake cop badge and suddenly acting like he's like in charge is always great. Like it works really well every time. Book 'em, guys. So give a shout out to that. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out to Arnold at the very beginning of the movie, just doing his "you're my number one customer, you're my number one customer, you're my number one customer" thing. And like just because in my headcanon it's clearly just them doing one of the takes over and over and over again, and then just using each one of the different takes and not like him doing separate things. It's great. Arnold Schwarzenegger being like I always love Arnold Schwarzenegger being a regular person in movies. It's hilarious to me every time, and him just being like, I'm just a businessman, and like my toy like fucking Chris Farley suit is hilarious. It's great. Like he's just too big of a person to do normal person jobs.
Yeah, that was a one of the little things in the trivia was at some point in that sequence, like he's signing on an invoice or whatever, and he just signed his real name instead of like in character or whatever. It's like, yeah, that sounds about right. I will also give a shout out to the like very like lo-fi kind of like cheap TV show opening that kind of introduces the Turbo Man like concept character show within this like within the movie kind of thing, because I think that was just a fun little Like I had largely forgotten about that element to kind of set up like this is why everybody wants this Turbo Man thing. So shout out to that. And then also, I mean, like shout out to that also kind of like like foreshadowing the final sequence of like, okay, the bad guy's gonna get the kid, dangle the kid from like the top of a very tall thing, and Turbo Man's gonna have to use his jetpack to save the day. And then going back to what you kind of touched on, like the end sequence, jetpack graphics and whatnot, and the like just very, very close up on Arnold Schwarzenegger in a costume, clearly just sitting on a rig or something like that. Very weak by any kind of modern standards, but it was fine for the time.
I did love whenever he is jetpacking around and then just like slams headfirst into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
The quip from Travi of just, oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
That he's dead.
And
also
that's how the other guy got the brain damage.
Yeah, and also the fact that the first time he uses the jetpack, he just completely loses control, and then he just like suddenly gets it once he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
Was very convenient of him. And also one thing I caught, I don't know if you noticed, is whenever he's in the suit and he needs to like use his like one of the weapons, it like shuts, like it pops out like the two things for him to hook onto and like shoot, and then it does the exact same motion whenever he jetpacks. And so apparently, just depending on how you feel, those buttons do different things, even though it's the exact same mechanic.
Yeah,
I also enjoyed that
because it's like the first thing he uses is like the disc shooter to knock Sinbad off the thing. Then
exact same graphic.
Yeah, then he at some point, like I think
boomerang.
It's like the disc shooter is like one hand, and then the boomerang's the other hand, and then if he's using both, that's when like the jetpack fires. So yeah, I mean, but that was also like dumb toys at that time kind of thing. That's so. Yeah, the last thing I think I want to kind of touch on is the reindeer sequence is definitely like a thing I remembered as a kid, but I also like, because we've done the Santa Claus 1 and 2 on for that D+ show, like the reindeer stuff from those movies also like got all jumbled up in my head, and so it was that's like okay, which reindeer bit is this? What are we gonna which reindeer sequence is this one gonna be? And maybe moving forward, I'll remember. Oh, this is the one where the reindeer just gets plastered at the end, where Arnold just gets a reindeer drunk at the end. Cool. Any final thoughts from you before we wrap up and grade it?
Nope, that was my stuff.
All right. Let's go ahead and dive into the report card where we grade the film from A+ to F. What do you want to give Jingle All the Way, Logan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more prone to be kind than I am to be mean-spirited. Like, I'll give it a B-, right? Like, I think it's fun. I think you can definitely watch it now and still enjoy it, right? And like, it's a short movie. It's an hour and a half long. You get Arnold Schwarzenegger, you get Rita Wilson, you get Phil Hartman, you get Sinbad, you get a very young Jake Lloyd,
who's pretty much just being exactly like it. Seeing this and then like obviously we watched Phantom Menace, a few months ago for this very show. Like not a lot of acting growth in those couple of years. It's very much like, oh yeah, he's just cute kid, and George Lucas was like, cute kid's what I want for Anakin, and it was like, but why? That was a terrible choice. So yeah, I was like, man, you just like, it's fine in this, but you're not great. Like I think like
he's got to be like 6, and he's got to be so young.
I mean, but there are definitely like better child actors that I've seen over the years and stuff, and yeah, it was rough. But he does what's asked of him, and sure, it works. Yeah, I think I mean, B- works for me too. I think that's where I'll go ahead and lump it in there. It's definitely one like, okay, I sat down and watched it for this. I probably don't need to like revisit this anytime soon. But it's still fun for kids, I'm sure.
Yeah, to me, it is a classic of like AMC Family's 25 Days of Christmas, and this is on a Thursday at 7 p.m., just have it on the background while you're doing something, like while you're making dinner in the kitchen, like having All the Way on. Like, it's like a perfect movie for that, where like I can just have it on in the background and enjoy it when I want to, and then just have it be background noise otherwise, right? Like, it's a great Thursday evening film in the 25 Days of Christmas, I think.
Yeah.
I think it fits that niche really well.
Yeah. All right. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. There is, as I alluded to earlier, Jingle All the Way 2 with Larry the Cable Guy. You can go watch that on Disney Plus, as well as The Santa Claus, Noel, Home Alone, Godmothered, A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey, The Santa Claus 2, and Home Alone 2: Lost in New York are your recommendations. And like we've done Disney Plus. We've done that D Plus shows for half those. For the Santa Claus, Santa Claus 2, Home Alone. The Santa Clauses and the Home Alones we've done out there. Extracurricular. You already said you watched this on Amazon Prime actually instead of Disney Plus.
I didn't even watch this on Disney Plus.
So yeah, you watching anything on Disney Plus these days?
Not yet, but I'm going to be watching the Beatles documentary on Disney Plus very, very soon. It is one of my most excited, anticipated things that I have to kind of cross off my 2021 list, especially as a massive, massive fan of the Beatles.
Cool. I've just been keeping up with Hawkeye, pretty much is the other thing I've been checking out there. I did see when I went to watch this, I saw Ron Gone Wrong, I think was the movie. That's like already on Disney Plus. It's like an animated movie I meant to try and see like a month or so ago or something like that. But it came out like around the same time as just a handful of things I was doing or something. So I didn't get around to it, and I was just like, oh wow, I knew it like did very badly in theaters. But the fact that like it was already on Disney Plus, I was like, oh, okay. So maybe I'll try and check that out at some point too. But anyway, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about Jingle All the Way for this week. Not sure yet what next episode's going to be. Got a couple ideas, but it'll still be something holiday themed. And then we will wrap up the year with the Book of Boba Fett, because the first episodes of that are going to be coming out in time for our final episode of 2021. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
I would give a shout out to this week's newest episode of Trevor's Let's Plays on YouTube.
That nerdy site plays is what I typically go with for the
he did the first hour of Halo Infinite on Thursday when you listen to this. So yesterday when you listened to this, I guess that went live. So all of that good Halo SEO content out there from that nerdy site, go check that out. As someone who has really only ever played one Halo game, and that was on the Legendary Collection or Master Chief Collection a couple years ago with a friend. I always enjoy seeing people play Halo games that maybe have not a super in-depth experience with Halo either. Go check that out. And then also check out all the wonderful content on the YouTube page as well. And then you can also be excited for all the future content we're going to be having as the year wraps up and we get into Game of the Year and end of the year stuff for that nerdy site.
Yep. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will shout out That News You Care About from this week. Logan was out sick, so he wasn't able to join us, but me and Cameron sat down and kind of did a recap of the Game Awards, talked about the winners, the losers, any of the announcements that really caught our attention, and just kind of our general thoughts on the show itself. And also, I forgot to really highlight it or point it out, but since Logan's here, I'll point out that Logan owes me Portillo's because I ended up winning the predictions on that one. So yay, Portillo's on Logan, that he'll actually get to cash in like a month.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. Yeah. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.